Hey all you homebrewers, what's going on? Happy Homebrew Weekly. I am currently drinking still my barley wine that's on tap that I was drinking last week. And it's in a little sample glass, and I'll give you some insight as to why it's actually in a sample glass. Tasty as always. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about yeast. And I know there's a lot of people on the homebrew community on YouTube that have been talking about yeast for a long time. There's some debate on whether you can reuse yeast or not. And if you do a lot of digging and if you do a lot of research, you'll find out that a lot of the people who are telling you not to reuse your yeast are yeast companies. And my theory as to why that is because they want you to keep buying new yeast every time, so you keep them in business. It makes sense, but it's not necessarily completely true. There's one homebrewer on YouTube that I noticed. He brews a lot of pre-hopped extract kits, and he's been reusing his yeast a lot, up to the point where there's 10, 11, 12 generations of yeast off of one packet of USO5 that was actually expired to begin with, which is fantastic. I'm a big believer in, if you like what you're brewing, then you're doing it right. So he's been using his yeast a lot for different kinds of beers, IPAs and darker beers and darker ales. I think that works great. If you can get your yeast to do the things that you want them to do, fantastic. But if you're an all-grain brewer, or if you're using hops in an extract kit, I feel like sometimes it's hard to separate the hops from the yeast and all the trub, and wash the yeast for the next couple generations. Because when you have hop particles in that trub on the bottom, it is hard to get rid of them without washing the yeast. It's hard to just skim off some without. You don't want to mess with it too much, because the more you handle it, the more opportunity there is for bacteria to get in, and mold, and just bad bugs. So, have I reused my yeast before? Yes, I have. I made a batch of cider from Kirkland. I used to have a bottle down here from a Kirkland gallon jug. I actually made a 6-gallon, a big recipe, and it turned out great. And it was the yeast strain was actually a cider. It was a Saf cider. It was new at the time. I think it was like a year and a half ago. So I made that cider, and I thought, well, I want to get another cider in the works because it takes a long time to clear, and if you age it for a long time, it usually tastes a little better. So I pitched right on top of the yeast cake, or I put the juice right on top of the yeast cake along with some nutrient, and it fermented. Actually, funny story, it was fermenting right here on the floor, and I went away for the weekend, and when I came back, there's still some spots. I'm going to see if I can get some shots of it. When I came back, the airlock blew off, and it wasn't a crazy mess. I've seen worse on YouTube, and I've seen worse pictures of people who had this issue, but it wasn't a pleasant thing to come home to. I kind of had a little smirk on my face and a little smile when I came in, because that had never happened before, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm a homebrewer, you're making a mess. So I've reused my yeast before. I've washed my yeast before, and I haven't reused it. I don't brew enough to be able to use yeast over and over again. I don't know how some of you guys can brew 5 gallons every 2 weeks and drink it all. I guess you guys have a lot of friends coming over. I don't have many people that come over by me, especially in the winter. So it's basically just me. And for something like this barley wine, it's about 10%. If I had 2 pints of it, I'm feeling pretty good. So yeah, let me know if you guys reuse your yeast, what your thoughts are. And dry yeast used to be a little bit cheaper than it is now. But it's still not super expensive, especially compared to the liquid yeast. The liquid yeast you're gonna pay a little premium for. And if you're brewing a specialty kind of beer, like an Oktoberfest or something like that, something that is either a lager or it has specific, like a Belgian ale, something that has specific flavors that come from the yeast, you're gonna need to buy that yeast. You're gonna need to spend the extra money and buy that yeast. But you know what? When you do buy that yeast and that beer comes out, it's gonna be excellent. And if it's not excellent, it's gonna be good, and you're gonna learn, and it's gonna be a learning experience for the next time. So if you have like a safe ale USO5, something simple, something clean, I think you can reuse that quite a few times if you're careful with it. The yeast that I washed that I didn't use, I put it in the fridge for a while. It bulged out of the jar. The top was bulging, and I opened it up and smelled it, and it was a little meaty. It wasn't good, so I chucked it. And ever since then, I've been using new yeast every time, just because I don't. The last beer I brewed was before this chestnut brown ale, which is still in the fermenter. Next week I plan on bottling it. Still haven't taken a gravity reading of it. The last one I brewed was that. Before that was this barley wine, and that was October. Maybe in October. Maybe November. Either way, I don't have enough time. I'm lucky to have the time to make these videos, and I do the best I can with the time that I have. But anyway, I digress. Yeast. Let me know your thoughts. It's a big part of beer, and I think it needs a little more attention than just saying like, just reuse it, you'll be fine. But at the same time, you don't need to really get into the nitty gritty of yeast in order to make good beer. And like I said, I'm a big believer, if you're liking what you brew, then you're golden. Then you're brewing good beer. So onto my tasting glass. I am going to a beer festival today. Hooray! I'm going to the Big Brew Beer Festival in Morristown, New Jersey. So that starts at noon. So I got a little tasting glass for, I'm going to a brew fest. They usually give these out. Yeah, that should be fun. Me and my wife are going. We're going to drive there, and then if we have too much to drink, which will probably happen, then we'll take an Uber back. So, let me know your thoughts on yeast, and I will see you guys next week. Cheers. Happy brewing.